Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Camper Report. We're a little bit later today, but that's all right. Um, I had some things to do in the morning, had to still get prepared for the show, but we're here. Let me just quickly just posting that on my channel that we were live, but we're live. We're here. It's a Thursday today where I'm at, but it's obviously a Wednesday night where you guys are at. I believe on the East Coast right now it is 7 p.m. and then 5 p.m. on where I used to live, Colorado Mountain Time, and then we have 4 p.m. Pacific. So we're going live. What a week of games it has been, really. All together, just what an absolute week of games. We had the Titans upsetting the Dolphins. We're going to talk about the Dolphins and the Tyreek Hill injury. We're going to talk about um, the Eagles versus Cowboys game. We're going to obviously talk about the Bills versus Chiefs game. We're going to talk about Brandon Staley and how he should be fired. It's going to be a jam-packed show. We've got a big show. I want to quickly say, because I forgot to say this the last few live shows, when I get back from Australia in a few weeks, I'm going to start working on making a website and making t-shirts for you guys to sell. I'm going to make t-shirts to sell of the channel. And it doesn't have to be just the Camper Report. It might be slogans on the t-shirts and stuff like that. So I want you guys to give me your t-shirt ideas, because here's the catch. If you guys can give me your t-shirt ideas of what should be on the t-shirt, then I'll take those comments of what I see and I will take those comments, take those design ideas that you guys have given me, and then maybe if I see one that I really like a lot, then I'll put that on a t-shirt. And so basically it gives you, the viewer, a chance to design a t-shirt that might be sold on my website when it does come out. So give me your ideas. I mean, it kind of has to be related to the show, but like, give me your ideas for t-shirts and I would love to hear them, because if you do that, then you could have the chance of designing your own t-shirt that will be sold on my website. So that, give me your ideas if you guys feel prompted to do something, and send them in. Calvin's Hobbs is here with us. Good evening, Calvin's Hobbs. Calvin, yeah, I think it's Calvin's Hobbs. I used to always call you Calvin and Hobbs, the comic, but it's Calvin's Hobbs. Which team, 49ers, Cowboys, or Eagles, is most likely to win their remaining 4 games? I think number 1, it has to be the Eagles. Although, actually, no. Number 1, it's 49ers. Number 2, it's Eagles. Number 3, it's Cowboys. I'll get into that because I'm going to talk about the number 1 seed in a second. That's a huge topic we have, who gets the number 1 seed in the NFC. I'll be talking about that very soon. The full rundown is in the description. Other streams are about to start this time too. Rapid fire. This evening time here is when a lot of content yeah, I mean, I'm just doing my thing. Carcast is tuning in. I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing, man? I'm doing good. I'd have to have you on soon. It's been a little tough for me to schedule shows now that I'm on a completely different time zone that's 16 hours ahead of the East Coast and 18 hours ahead of where I used to live. So I'm having a little hard time scheduling shows, but I'll get back into it when I get back. Don't sell the shirts, give them to, hold on. Great Azure says, don't sell the shirts, give them to your viewers. Everyone want to make a buck. People are poor. We need free. That is true. And that is why, if you guys do all of that, you could get, I forgot to mention this, but if you guys, send me in your t-shirt ideas, then you get your first t-shirt for free. And that gives me, you give me a good thought to think about, I'll definitely make a sale when I first come out with them. So if I do see a likable winner among all the designs that I get, then I will give that person a free t-shirt, and I'll think about doing sales and stuff like that. That Steelers Nation Australia dude blocked me. What a clown. Bro, you're probably, I don't know. I mean, maybe you were talking trash. I don't know. I like him. He's a cool dude. We collabed before the season started, before the Niners played the Steelers. I'm in Tasmania, which is the bottom of Australia, the island. He, I think, is somewhere. I think he lives in Perth, so we're not next to each other. I wish I could collab with him in person, but we're not really in the same part of Australia. But let's get to the topics. That's what you guys, of course, tuned in for. So we have to get to the topics. We'll get to the whole Eagles-Cowboys breakdown and then who gets the number 1 seed in a minute. But first, we have to talk about the Monday night game that occurred. The Titans beat the Dolphins 28-27. And let's first talk about how Tyreek Hill is injured. I forgot my mouse. It's going to be annoying to read comments. But let's first talk about how Tyreek Hill is injured. He's day-to-day with an ankle injury, I believe it is. I don't know if the Dolphins win without Tyreek Hill. If you guys remember when Jalen Waddle went out earlier this season and the Dolphins were playing the Chiefs, they scored like 17 points or something like that. I don't know if the Dolphins can win without Tyreek Hill, because as they proved earlier in the season when they lost Jalen Waddle, it was really hard for them to even put a productive offense on the field without Jalen Waddle. And this will be without their best offensive player, Tyreek Hill. It's just with Tyreek Hill, you lose a lot of speed and depth. I mean, if you look, without Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, there's not a ton of good wide receivers that the Dolphins have, and like none of their running backs are like super elite either. And I'll get into more of Tua Tagovailoa, but I mean, with pressure, and their offensive line is super depleted. They lost their center for the year, torn ACL. And so I don't know if they beat the Jets without Tyreek Hill, without their center, because as earlier in the year when Jalen Waddle went out, their offense was pretty bad. And Tua Tagovailoa, I mean, the offensive line, that is the main reason why the Dolphins lost last game versus in Monday night, because the offensive line later in that game, the Titans were getting home with 4 pass rushers. They were getting to Tua, and Tua is the type of quarterback that when he is under pressure, he's not super great he's actually a terrible quarterback under pressure, because he's the type of quarterback who needs to step back, really plant his feet and fire it. Pretty accurate when that happens, but there were a few times, and I'll bring up a few plays. So there was a few times in this game. It was the last play of the game. 4th and 2, last play of the game. When you go back and watch the highlights, Tua gets under pressure. He's looking to his left. He gets under pressure. And if you see, there's the tight end. I don't know exactly what his name is, but if you see there's a tight end on the right side of Tua that is running just a quick out. It's like a 4-yard out, but it's 4th and 2. So if Tua were to complete that pass to that tight end, then they pick up the first down and they move the chains and the game is not over. But Tua looks his way, and one thing that I learned from this game, Tua under pressure isn't like super good again about throwing the ball across his body. And so this guy was on the left side of him. On the right side of him, he would have had to throw it across his body. And it's almost like, and the tight end was almost wide open. I mean, there was some coverage on him, but Tua could have hit him. So there's just limitations to Tua Tagovailoa. and I saw a few times during this game, and really has defined him as a quarterback through his whole career. He's just not the greatest passer under pressure. And it's bad because the Dolphins have had so many offensive line injuries, and that's why I don't consider them a Super Bowl contender. And that's why, I don't know. I don't know if the Dolphins beat the Jets without Tyreek Hill. I really don't. It's gonna be hard for them, especially the Jets have a good defense. The Jets have a defensive line that can absolutely destroy the Dolphins' banged up offensive line. So I don't know if they can win. But I want to quickly break down this game a little bit more. I mean, and going back real quick to the center is like the backup center that the Dolphins put in was not good either. He had a bad snap. There was 9 minutes, 17 seconds left in the first quarter. The backup center they put in snapped it bad to Tua, and it was a turnover to the Titans. Midway through the first turnover, Titans recovered the ball. It was a bad snap by the backup center to Tua. So, and then you also have to take into consideration the Bills now kind of starting to get a little bit hot, beat the Chiefs, almost beat the Eagles. The Bills are knocking on the door as well. So now what they did get right, the Dolphins, early in this game, quick slants, getting the ball out quick. That's how the Dolphins are going to have to play the rest of their games. Now that they have a banged up offensive line, the Dolphins are going to have to play the rest of their games. Quick slants, quick plays, so that Tua won't be under pressure. But there's only so far that there's only so much you can play that. You can only play the game with, like, there's eventually slant routes become, the defense reads it and the defense catches up. And so, I mean, that's how the Dolphins are going to have to play, getting the ball out fast, but there's only so far you can go with that. And again, I'll give up another example. Tua Tagovailoa gets pressured, 3rd and 7, 14 minutes, 15 seconds left in the second, throws a pick over the middle. So almost throws a pick over the middle. And it's a turnover. Well, the Dolphins had to punt. So under pressure, he ain't great. Now, let's flip real quick to Will Levis because he was impressive. We'll quickly take some comments. Miami is fraudulent. Sorry, Grandizer. Yeah. Carcast says, I think Devin Achane is getting up there to be a star in the league. Yeah, but I don't think they use him enough. And he's also not really a workhorse back. He's a little small for that. An issue that is being brought up is that Tyreek and Tua are focused on getting Tyreek to 2,000 yards, which makes the offense one-dimensional. Do you really think that's the problem? They're trying to stat pad a player instead of trying to win? I don't know. If that's what they're really trying to do, that's concerning because you should not be focusing on that. Give me 2021 Tua, where he won 7 games in a row, had one of the highest percentages with only Waddle as his above-average wide receiver, a poor O-line with little run game. Yeah, I mean, Tua kind of seems like the type of person after his concussions last year that kind of went into a shell a little bit. I mean, he had some traumatizing things happen to him. So I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of was the case, as he's kind of gone into a shell a little bit more when he feels pressure because he's had so many concussions and been hit so many times. But let's get to Will Levis before we take more of these comments. Will Levis. Just what a difference he was from Ryan Tannehill. His over the middle, downfield, just his ability to run, his ability to throw strong bullet throws over the middle, his strong arm, his mobility. I mean, just an absolute all-around quarterback. Levis, Ryan Tannehill was making all the Titans receivers just look average. Levis is making them look better. I mean, even with Hopkins, Hopkins now, I feel like with the Titans before Levis stepped in wasn't a deep threat. Now he's a deep threat. He's making Hopkins a deep threat. I mean, his arm talent, the arm talent that Levis has is the best arm talent that DeAndre Hopkins has. Like, DeAndre Hopkins hasn't had a quarterback of this talent throwing to him since, I would believe, Deshaun Watson. That's just, I mean, with a strong arm, as we all know, you can allow more room for error because Levis, you can fit it in tighter windows. You can, like with Brock Purdy, the difference with Brock Purdy is Brock Purdy has to be on his P's and Q's because he doesn't have the strongest of arms. And so Brock Purdy has to, anticipate what's going to happen. Levis doesn't have to because Levis has such a strong arm that if he makes a mistake, he can just sling it into a tight window and it's complete. The only thing I want to see more from Levis is the anticipation because in this game, like he was fitting it in through tight windows, but a part of me thinks if he just had a little bit more anticipation and he threw it a little bit earlier, then maybe the Titans, maybe those receivers could be have more of an opportunity to gain a little bit more yak after the catch. So the only thing I'd want to see is maybe Levis have a little bit more anticipation. But that, I think, I'm trying to think if I have anything else on Levis. No. Okay, well, I think I got to the breakdown pretty good on that game. Let's take some more comments, and then we'll get back to the show. We're going to cover next Eagles versus Cowboys breakdown. That was a little bit long of a breakdown. I'll keep it a little bit shorter. Eagles versus Cowboys game breakdown, and then we'll get to who gets number 1 seed in the NFC. The Finns issues stem with Coach Mike McDaniel, poor play calling, failing to get decent center before the season began, not running the ball, O-line depth. Could be. But here's the thing. My question is, and why didn't they draft a better running back in the draft? I mean, I know there wasn't great running backs this draft. The draft wasn't like super jam-packed full of them. But why did they fail to? Because the problem with them is they have good running backs, but they just don't have elite runners that can carry the ball 20 times per game. The thing that makes the 49ers so good is, I mean, Christian McCaffrey can carry it 22, 23 times per game. If you give 23 carries to Raheem Mostert, he's going to get injured. Same, Devon Achane just isn't that type of guy who's going to carry it 20 times per game. So they need to find, and then I agree with not failing to find a decent center before the season began. That might stem back to a little bit of what the 49ers do. The 49ers tend to not focus on their offensive line as much. And so maybe Mike McDaniel has that same philosophy as Kyle Shanahan does. Just don't invest as much in the offensive line, which is bad because if you have a quarterback like Tua, who's different to Brock Purdy, Tua's a little bit more shaky under pressure. Brock Purdy's more of the guy who's a little bit more confident scrambling around. Tua's not that type of guy. So, the system that Mike McDaniel's trying to put in place is doesn't fit Tua Tagovailoa because Tua needs a good offensive line. Grandizer. So it's not only on Tua, every quarterback who does not have an O-line will struggle. No QB is great under pressure with a poor O-line. Yeah, but okay. I'd argue that when he is under pressure, he kind of tends to get tunnel vision, put his head down, not make his read, and not look downfield. I mean, there was 12:48. I think it was 12 minutes 48 in the fourth quarter. The Dolphins were in the red zone, third down. Tua got pressured, and I think he ended up like slipping and falling down because he just he couldn't handle it. He didn't step up in the pocket. He just fell down. It's just, I don't know. I think he panics a little bit when he's under pressure. And he definitely needs to fix that, because it's like, it's not, I mean, obviously the offensive line is bad, but you have to have a quarterback that stays composed under pressure. Calvin's Hobbs says Tua had 5 sacks because they had 4 backups on the offensive line. Yeah, that's true. I'm not saying it's all his fault. I'm just saying I feel like he could be a little bit more composed under pressure. Anyway, let's get to this next topic. Eagles versus Cowboys game breakdown. Who gets the number 1 seed in the NFC? So I mean, I had a few notes written on this. I think, before the game, I said Cowboys. I'm going to try to keep this topic a little bit shorter because last topic went a little bit long. But before this game, I said the Cowboys are going to take a page out of the Niners notebook. They're going to do a lot of pre-snap motion. They're going to do a lot of end arounds, get guys out in space. End arounds to get guys out in space and make the Eagles linebackers in the second level tackle, because the Eagles linebackers are super undisciplined. If the Cowboys can get their receivers out in space with end arounds, with quick slants and stuff like that, it's going to be really hard for the Eagles to stop this Cowboys defense. And what do you know? I was right. The Cowboys' first play, they had an end around to Turpin, their receiver, and he went for like 20 yards. That was one of the first plays of the game. Dak Prescott, very impressive, 24 for 39 in this game to bring up an amazing play that he made. 10 minutes left in the first quarter. He had pressure. They were in the red zone. He had pressure, scrambles out, dumps it off to I believe it was a tight end, and that tight end carries it for a touchdown. So this game was very much Dak Prescott. He played really, really well, but I will say that the Cowboys started off this game aggressive, and they knew that they had to come out and they had to put their best foot forward at the Eagles, and they had to punch them and punch them hard, punch them quick. They made a statement, 4th and 2, early in this game. They went for it on 4th and 2, the Cowboys, and converted late. I think it was the late first quarter. And another way they were aggressive was deep throws down the field right away. I mean, there were a few early in this game, a few deep shots to CeeDee Lamb. So they were aggressive early and often in this game, and it showed, because if you're aggressive with the Eagles defense, they're going to fold. They're going to fold. They were also testing the Eagles cornerbacks to cover, because when you go deep down the field, it makes the Eagles cornerbacks cover one-on-one. And I don't know, the Eagles cornerbacks, just their whole defense in general is not very good at all. So they were aggressive. They were testing the Eagles cornerbacks early, and it panned out. But I will point out, on the defensive side of the ball for the Cowboys and offensive side of the ball for the Eagles, Hurts is definitely injured. It's kind of obvious. I'll bring up a example. 1 minute 50 left in the second quarter, 2nd and 10. I believe the Cowboys sent a blitz. Hurts, I feel like on any other day, he could have scrambled out. It was pretty easy to scramble out, but he instead just like tucked the football and just dove to the ground a little bit. And a lot of time, I mean, that's not the Jalen Hurts that I'm used to seeing. I'm used to seeing a Jalen Hurts that when he's under pressure is going to scramble out of the pocket. And there was a lot of times this game where he just didn't. So I think that knee injury that we've been told has been nagging him for a while is kind of starting to become more and more apparent. He's not as mobile as he used to be. And I think that's an issue that, I mean, if he can get that fixed, that's why it's almost essential that the Eagles get the number 1 seed, because then they can have a bye and he can kind of get that knee rested up. But if he cannot deal with this injury, that could pose a really bad problem for the Eagles later on in the season in the playoffs. And then let's see. Well, and I will say the Eagles need to establish a little bit more of a run game. I mean, their lead back, DeAndre Swift, 11 carries. You know, that's the problem is the Cowboys compared to the Cowboys in this game. Like, I'll tell you the final key. It really came down to this: the Cowboys led more surgical drives. I'll put it in this: surgical drives. Cowboys had a 36-minute. They had 36 minutes time of possession, right? And that came from the Cowboys running the ball. I believe they ran the ball. I want to say they ran it 28 times with their two lead backs, Pollard and Dowdle, however you say it. The Eagles ran the ball 11 times with their lead back, and I think 15 times, over the game. So Eagles, the biggest problem with them is now that Jalen Hurts is injured, their offensive coordinator needs to realize, Brian Johnson, we can't put the load on him anymore. We have to start running the ball with the backs that we have, Gainwell, Swift. You have to start doing that. And then, but that's really how the Cowboys won this game, was running the ball, setting up the pass through the run, leading more surgical drives that took longer. Again, and I'll give you an example. The Cowboys, they ran it 29 times. Okay. The Cowboys had 5.3 yards per play. The Eagles had 6.2 yards per play. So the Eagles actually had more yards per play, but because the Cowboys were leading more long sustained drives, the Eagles weren't able to get as many opportunities because their time of possession was way lower than the Cowboys. And that's because the Eagles didn't establish the run, and that's what they need to do. And if they don't do that, I think their offensive coordinator is out by the end of the end of this season. So that's kind of, that's what I took away from this game, is the Eagles that was the main thing, is just take the pressure off of Jalen Hurts. The Cowboys did it, and they succeeded because they knew that if we can establish a run game, if we can be aggressive early in the game, then we can win this game. And so what did they do? They came out, they threw the ball deep early on. They went for it on fourth down early on. They did end arounds, motions early on. So that's really that's what the Cowboys did very similar to what the 49ers did last week, and it worked. So the Eagles offensively just need to run the ball more, and maybe they just don't trust the guys that they have at the running back position. But that's a huge problem for them. Cowboys would take insult that you say they took a page out of the 49ers offense. They said they have always tried to do that, but it hadn't worked till now. I honestly, I don't think, maybe it just didn't work till now, but I also think they had an Eagles team that, first thing, the Cowboys had an extra long week. Second thing, they had an Eagles team that had just been absolutely beaten. No confidence. The morale after that 49ers loss, the Eagles suffered, their morale was probably so low. So they played an Eagles team that was definitely not at full strength. And so maybe that's why they blew them out by so much. But I'll say, this game plan was very similar to what the 49ers did. So, and I think, the Cowboys, their argument is kind of right. I think the reason why the 49ers play that style of football so well is they have elite guys that can execute it to perfection. The Cowboys don't have they have a few elite weapons, but the Cowboys don't have a 49ers elite weapons. Like the Cowboys have a few guys, but they're not as deep as the 49ers in offensive weapons. So maybe they do that game plan all the time. It just doesn't work. Because maybe their players just can't execute it all the time. Eagles are cooling off at the wrong time. No team can stay hot the whole season. Yeah. That's true. Coach Mike McDaniel wants to do the 49er way, try to get great defense, always issue with the O-line, running back by committee. The 49ers did running back got by committee for the longest time, but now they're kind of going to a central running back system around Christian McCaffrey. And I think if you have an elite running back, you can't do running back by committee. And there's only so much that you can do running back by committee, because eventually, if like, you have to at least get elite running backs to do that, because it's like, I don't view Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane as elite. And so if you can't run the ball at an elite level and you don't have a quarterback who, like, if the Dolphins had Patrick Mahomes, then I'd be like, okay, they don't have elite running backs, but they have an elite quarterback. But the fact that the Dolphins really don't have an elite quarterback and they also don't have elite running backs, it's like, you can't, it's hard. If you're going to have a non-elite quarterback, you have to have an elite running back. And it goes the other way as well, vice versa. He's an offensive guy, and yet it's the offense that struggles. That's a huge issue to me. Yeah, that's true. Let's see. Dolphins have a bruiser back in undrafted in UDFA, Chris Brooks, but he got injured early on in the season. That was a huge loss. Interesting. I'll look him up. Okay. So who gets number 1 seed? I know I kind of took a while to answer this, but who gets number 1 seed? I think it's the Niners. I do. I think the Cowboys have a hard schedule. They have the Dolphins, they have the Lions coming up, and then I had this pulled up. Hold on. Let me pull up the Cowboy. I believe it's the Dolphins, Lions, and it's the, hold on, guys. Bills. Yeah, Bills, Dolphins, Lions, and Commanders is their last 4 games. I think they'll beat the Dolphins. I think they'll beat the Lions, but I don't know if they beat the Bills next week. I really don't. So, I mean, I think they're going to at least lose one of those games. And if they lose one of those games, then the 49ers have the number 1 seed. The Eagles, yes, they do have the easiest schedule. They have the Giants twice. They have the Commanders, and then they have the Seahawks. I believe it is. I think that's what the final 4 games for the Eagles are. But next week, they're going to get a Seahawks. First thing, the Eagles have to go on their 2nd straight road trip to Seattle, one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL. And if you're telling me that a beat up, low morale Eagles team facing versus a Seahawks team that is getting Geno Smith back from injury, that is getting healthier, that game's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people expected. And so if the Eagles lose that game, then all the Niners have to do, like, the Niners obviously have to win out. But if you're telling me that the Eagles aren't going to lose the next 1 out of the 4, if they're going to win out after they've been on a 2-game terrible losing streak, I don't believe it. I think the Eagles are going to at least lose one of the next 4 games because their confidence is so low, because I feel like the book is out a little bit on them, because Jalen Hurts is injured. And they also play the Giants twice, which the Giants aren't a good team, but the Giants just beat the Packers. Tommy DeVito's looking better. I don't know. I think the Eagles lose 1 game. And so now all the 49ers have to do, I mean, they might not even have to win versus the Ravens. And I think they have a good chance of winning versus the Ravens. But I think it's the Niners, going to be the Niners. I think the Cowboys lose one of the next 4 games. I think the Eagles lose one of the next 4 games. And I think the Niners could lose one of the next 4 games. But if they all lose 1 game within the next 4 games, the Niners are 1 seed because they own the tiebreaker over both of those teams. So I think Niners get 1 seed. I think Niners get 1 seed. My brothers will make the argument, hey, the Eagles have an easy remaining schedule. And I'd say, yes, it looks easy, but your team is not at full strength and they're not doing good right now. So the fact that you're expecting a team that is beaten up and bruised to win out is really hard to do. And Calvin's Hobbs brings up a great point. The Seahawks are desperate and did play the Cowboys and Niners very competitively. Yes, exactly. He brings up a great point. Let's see here. Niners tried to have a main running back when they drafted Trey Sermon. However, it didn't pan out. Yeah, CMC changed all that. Still, CMC has to be used sparingly. That is like with, oh yeah, sorry. I'm reading all wrong. That is like with Achane. Achane. I don't even know what to call him. Achane. I agree. They have to definitely take the load off of him a little bit more. Let's see. Keep it a buck. There's very little tape on Tommy DeVito. Wait till he plays more and the defenses get more tape on him. Yeah, that's probably true. I'm just still saying, I mean, also the Eagles play the Giants 2 out of 3 weeks. So at the end of the season, that's kind of hard. So next topic. Let's end that. That was a pretty long topic, but it was pretty loaded. I'm going to quickly run through this one. I originally had this topic a little bit earlier than the Eagles versus Cowboys game breakdown, but I did that topic first. Is this the end of Brandon Staley without Herbert? Because Justin Herbert underwent finger surgery, and I can't remember if he's out for the rest of the season. I think he is. It's on his throwing hand. So at the most, he's going to be out for a few weeks, if not for the whole season. And this Chargers team is probably not making the playoffs. I think it is. I think it's really, really obvious that, they drafted a receiver, Quentin Johnston, in the first round. He hasn't been super productive this year. And whether that's his fault or just the system he's in, I think it's more his fault because he has a great quarterback throwing to him. Quentin Johnston, I mean, Zay Flowers has been doing better than him. Zay Flowers went, I think, a few picks later to the Ravens, I want to say. Or no, earlier. I think it was a few picks earlier to the Ravens. The Chargers decided not to trade up and get Zay Flowers. And now Zay Flowers is making them look bad because he is outperforming the guy that they did draft, Quentin Johnston. And so that's kind of making the Chargers look bad because the receiver that they did draft has not been as productive as Zay Flowers and a few of the other receivers in his Tank Dell, a few of the other receivers in his draft class. And so I'm wondering if Brandon Staley was to blame for that pick as well. Because if he was to blame for the Quentin Johnston pick, then that would add even more. Like, not only has he had like a not great offense this year, he also just has made the wrong picks in the draft. He hasn't, I mean, it just, he just hasn't been very productive as a coach. And it just shows to me that not all good offensive coordinators are good head coaches. There's a difference. Good head coaches, not only can they, not only are they geniuses, but they can also lead a team and they're good leaders. I don't see that in Brandon Staley. I think that coupled with, I think he was part of the Quentin Johnston, pick. That's going to get him fired. His ability to not be productive on offense, as well as his bungle, I guess you could call it, with the first round pick that they had this year. So, I mean, Mike Williams is hurt. Yeah, I mean, that also hurts, but the Chargers also still have a good offensive line. They still have Austin Eckler. And another thing, he hasn't really, their defense is terrible. He hasn't really focused on that much. You also couple that with they made that huge trade a few years ago for what was it? JC Jackson. That didn't pan out very well. They made a trade for Khalil Mack. I mean, that was a pretty good pick, but for what they paid for him, I don't think he's productive for what they paid for Khalil Mack. I think he's been good, just they paid him a lot of money. So I think there's a lot of different. I mean, I just think that they haven't built a good enough defense. They've had enough offensive weapons to at least win more games than they've had. They've had enough offensive weapons to win more games than they have already. So it's just there comes a point when there's a lot of issues and a lot of problems and a lot of things that have been done this past season that there comes a point that you can no longer make excuses for, you know? Still got Keenan Allen, but he's hurt. Yeah. Benji's next show, Coach Belichick and Patriots agree to part ways after this season and end of an era. Coach does not reach Coach Shula all-time winningest coach. Well, he will on some other team, right? Bill Belichick. I mean, he's still going to keep coaching, so he's going to reach that record. Did that news actually come out? Did they actually part ways? I didn't know that news came out about Bill Belichick. Let me know if that actually is a real report. Let's take a few more comments. You said bungle isn't the monster in what is that word when you when you mess up? It's like bungle. It's kind of a weird word, but that's what I was trying to. Basically Brandon Staley messed it up. That's what I was, or messed that pick up. That's what I was trying to say. Only if Coach Belichick coaches the 49ers. I like Kyle Shanahan more than Bill Belichick. I'm sorry. I think his offensive schemes are. First thing, I think Kyle Shanahan's ability to adjust to the speed of the NFL is really key. I think his offensive schemes are really better than what Bill Belichick's are right now. No, I'm good. I'll stick with Kyle Shanahan. Better play caller right now. I think like Bill Belichick has had a good philosophy, but I think that, and maybe it was just the talent that he had around him. I just think that Kyle Shanahan is a better scheme for what the NFL for what the NFL does right now. It is reported from a source, but not confirmed until the end of the season. Okay, interesting. Okay, well, breaking down, I'm going to quickly go through this Chiefs versus Bills game. I don't have a ton on it. Both QBs had identical stat lines. I mean, it was crazy because Mahomes had almost identical. Mahomes had 25 for 43. Was 25 for 43 for 271 yards, 1 TD, and 1 interception. Allen was 23 for 42 for 233 yards, 1 TD, and 1 interception. So almost identical. Neither quarterback did super great on the stat line. Really, neither one did amazing. And defenses were really good in this game, which is, both defenses are top 10 in the league. The Chiefs even better. And what's crazy to me is the Chiefs are wasting a year where their defense is all-time great for what the Chiefs have had in the past. Like their defense this year is the best the best defense that the Chiefs have ever had in probably the Mahomes era. And because their offense has taken a major step down, it's making the rest of the team look bad. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs have the best offense they've had in a while, and they're wasting it because they just don't have a good offense. They have the best defense that they've had in a while, and they're wasting it because they just don't have a good offense. So both defenses were really good. Chiefs held Stephon Diggs to 4 catches. The Bills held Kelsey to 6 catches, which Kelsey still had 6 catches, but I mean, for him, that's not that great because some games he can go off for 10, 11 catches. The deciding factor, though, in this game, really to me, was time of possession. You had Bills with 35 minutes, 21 seconds, and then you had the Chiefs with 24 minutes, 39 seconds. So the Bills they were leading a lot more surgical drives in this game. They also ran the ball a little bit more than they usually do, although I think they ran it like 18 times with their backs and then 10 times with Josh Allen. So it was, they ran the ball more than they usually do, which still isn't impressive because they still didn't run the ball a whole lot, but they committed to it a little bit more. Which is what I'd like to see, is them committing more to the run, and they did a little bit more in this game, as well as they played less sloppy football than the Chiefs. The Chiefs had 7 penalties in this game, and obviously, as you guys all know, the famous penalty by Kadarius Toney that negated that huge touchdown from Kadarius Toney. He lined up off sides, Patrick Mahomes got super mad, and that basically ended the game. So, the Chiefs could have won this game, but they also were, I'm pretty sure, missing Isaiah Pacheco, who I didn't see anything of him in the stat sheet. So I'm guessing that the Chiefs were missing Isaiah Pacheco. That, coupled with the fact that they just didn't really run the ball all day. They were a sloppy football team. They had 7 penalties. They had obviously 1 penalty that killed them at the end. And hey, if you play undisciplined football, you're going to lose. You're going to lose games. And now they have Broncos knocking at the door. Broncos are 7-5. No, Broncos are 7-6. Chiefs are 8-5. And so the Broncos are 1 game back. And both teams, what's funny, both teams have almost identical schedules. They both play the Chargers, Raiders, and Patriots. And then I think the last game for either team is different. But they both have very identical schedules. So, hey, if you would have told me before the season the Broncos week 13 would have a chance after week 14 would have a chance of winning the AFC West, I would have said, get this person out of here. But they actually have a chance of winning the AFC West over none other than the Chiefs. So I'm cheering for the Broncos. Obviously, I have not come to really not like the Chiefs at all, but the Chiefs need to get something fixed. I mean, I think the biggest thing with them on offense is they have unexperienced guys on the offense. Kadarius Toney, not very disciplined. Sky Moore, just not, like, they just have not a super elite offense, but also just they're not very stout. They're not very stingy on offense. Like, what I'm trying to say is their offensive guys, not only are they just not super elite, they're just also not disciplined. They're not, I'm trying to find a word. They're not good with the little things. They're not good with the little things. And by little things, I mean lining up offsides on the most important play of the game, which is what Kadarius Toney did. So that's really the Chiefs' problem. And that, I mean, the thing, and I've said this over and over again, the Chiefs made a huge bet this season. They said, we're going to rely on a bunch of these rookies that we've drafted in the receiving corps. They basically said, we're going to rely on Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, a bunch of these promising guys that we've drafted or traded for that we think we can develop them. And if they pan out, we're going to have a super good team. And so they basically took a huge risk with their receiving corps. They said, we're going to try to develop a bunch of these guys, and if it pans out, then we're going to be super good. If it doesn't pan out, then we're going to suck. And so the bet that they made at the beginning of the season has not worked out for them. And they haven't been developing these guys the way that they thought they would. And it hasn't panned out well for them. Calvin Hobbs says offensive coaches rule the NFL right now. Most of the playoff teams have offensive coaches. Yeah. That is true. And that's why a lot of head coaches that you see are becoming head coaches because they were a good offensive coach. For example, Brandon Staley was an offensive coach, I believe, for the Rams. But not all good offensive coordinators are good coaches because there's an it factor. You have to be a good leader as well. And then the guy for the Lions, what's his name? Oh my gosh. I can't remember. Ben Johnson, I think it is, right? The offensive coordinator for the Lions is about to be a head coach next year. So if I were the Chargers, I'd go after if you do fire Brandon Staley, I would go after what's his name? Jim Harbaugh. Like, he's not a super popular name, but I'd go after Jim Harbaugh because Jim Harbaugh is going to want to coach Justin Herbert. And I think he could go in there. He could establish a run game. He could bring that defense because in college football, he's always had really good defenses. I think he could bring that Chargers defense back to where it needs to be. I think he'd bring a lot of. I mean, I know he's had a lot of allegations against him this year, but he's a really good leader. I feel like it's either going to be Jim Harbaugh or it's going to be the guy from the Lions. And again, what the Chargers have going for them is the Chargers have a good quarter. Like, any coach is going to want to coach there because they have an amazing quarterback, that Justin Herbert, that is really talented. So he's going to eventually get a Super Bowl ring. Okay, last topic before I get out of here. Brock Purdy playing on another level, but should we wait to call him elite? I wanted to quickly talk about this topic. This isn't a super big Niners show. I will be doing more of one on probably Saturday, your guys' time, Saturday. Hopefully that will be breaking down more of the game. Or maybe, you know what? Maybe Friday, your guys' time. Friday night, maybe I'll do a show that'll be breaking down more of the Niners versus their upcoming matchup versus the Cardinals and maybe a few other Niners topics. But for now, I'm going to talk about Brock Purdy. Should we wait to call him elite? Yes, 100%. We shouldn't wait to call him elite because this guy. Now, here's the thing. I do think we need to wait and see. Like, right now, he's playing at an elite level. So I'm going to call him elite now. But so I'm kind of like, we should wait to call him elite, but we also shouldn't wait to call him elite because he's playing at an elite level. So right now he's elite. I'm going to call him elite. But I think in the future, we do need to wait because we haven't seen him in that many playoff games. If I'm going to call him because like right now I'm calling him elite, but that could change. Like Patrick Mahomes, he's not playing that well right now, but I'm going to still call him elite because he's just proven over and over and over again in the most important moments that he is elite. I want to see Brock Purdy in more playoff games for me to actually call him he's like a generational quarterback. Because we haven't seen him in a ton of high pressure games. And maybe we never will this season, but he's eventually going to come to a place where he's going to have to he's going to have to lead comeback. He hasn't really led a comeback in his career yet because the Niners have been so good. But I think we do somewhat need to wait to call him a generational quarterback because he hasn't really proven it a ton in the playoffs. He hasn't played a ton of playoff games. He hasn't played in a ton of high pressure situations. Right now, I'll call him elite, but am I ready to call him, up there with Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, whatever? No. So, Purdy has more playoff wins than Lamar Jackson. That is true, but I wouldn't Lamar Jackson is elite, but he hasn't proven a ton either. So I wouldn't call him I think there's there's different levels of elite. There's I guess what I want to say is sustained success. yes, Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson are elite, but have they had sustained success for many, many years? Lamar Jackson kind of has. Brock Purdy still needs to prove that he can have sustained success. And so, I mean, if you ask the question, it depends on whether Brock Purdy is elite. It depends how you define it. Do you define elite as how he's playing right now, or do you define elite as sustained success? I kind of go both ways with that. I'd say he's kind of in between, because for me to actually call him, okay, this guy is generational, he needs to have sustained success, which I think he will eventually get to. I think he will have sustained success. So I'm kind of both ways. I'm not going to answer that. I'd say he is elite right now, but I definitely want to see more in the playoffs. I want to see more sustained success without injuries. Yeah. Is Purdy elite? Depends on who you ask. 49ers fans will say yes. Cowboys, Eagles, Rams, Seahawks, Cardinals fan will call him a bum. Cardinals fans will say Purdy who? Yeah, that's true. No, I mean, my brother Joseph, he still will say things like, you know, Purdy isn't great. He just has a great supporting cast. And I turn that kind of argument against him. I say, well, Jalen Hurts has a good supporting cast, and he's not. And like all the good quarterbacks in the NFL, except maybe Patrick Mahomes, have good supporting casts. So if you're going to say that argument with Brock Purdy, then you also have to say it against, a lot of the good quarterbacks in the NFL. So, yeah. Well, the big headline for today and for this topic is sustained success. Can he have that? And we don't know yet. And that is yet to be written, because he just hasn't played enough games. I do think that it's hard to stop Brock Purdy because he has a deep arm. He has a good arm for throwing deep. Even though it's not like super elite, he still has a decent arm. He still can hit the deep throws. So you can't like load the box. You can't load a bunch of players inside 10 yards because he can kill you deep. But you also can't cover the deep pass too well, because then he's going to kill you short. So he's really hard to stop. He has and he's also mentally really, he's a really smart quarterback. So he has all the traits and all the ability to be elite. The only thing, I mean, he doesn't have a super elite arm, but hey, Drew Brees didn't have an elite arm and he was still elite. So, yeah, it really just depends who you ask, like Grandizer says. But hey, we'll see. 2 years down the line, if he's still doing what he's doing right now, then yes, he's good. I think it just really depends how you define elite. And I'd say there's different tiers and echelons of elite. I'd say there's 3 tiers. Like tier 3 is you've had sustained success, you have a bunch of talent, you've led comebacks, you've won a ton in the playoffs. That's like Patrick Mahomes. Then there's tier 2. You have a bunch of talent, you haven't really won a Super Bowl yet, but you've won a few times in the playoffs, stuff like that. That's kind of Josh Allen. Then you have tier 1 of elite, where you're starting to really show flashes of being a super elite quarterback. You're starting to really figure it all out, but you haven't really won a ton in the playoffs either. And you don't have like a lot of elite talent. That's more Brock Purdy. Like he doesn't have elite talent. He's playing elite, but he also hasn't played a lot in the playoffs. He hasn't proved it a ton. That's kind of Brock Purdy. So I think there's different tiers. There's different quotas for being elite. I don't know if that made sense, but I think there's different categories. Raiders fans said that Jimmy Garoppolo was elite when they got him. Every fan base thinks their QB is elite. It's a silly debate. You can't judge the movie till the credits run. Yeah? Although, why did they say he was elite? The heck? Jimmy Garoppolo, there is a reason why the 49ers tried to start Trey Lance that one year before he got injured, because they did not want to start Jimmy Garoppolo. And then when Trey Lance got injured, they had no choice. But I'm not even sure the Niners would have made it to the NFC Championship game last year if Jimmy Garoppolo wouldn't have gotten injured. I'm not sure if they would have made it to the NFC Championship game with him. I really don't think so. Yeah. I don't even want to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo anymore because I spent so many years heartbroken, in pain, because the Niners would always play so well, and then we'd always get heartbroken because at the last moment, Jimmy Garoppolo would do some stupid interception or something, and then we'd lose important games. So, anyway, guys, this has been an hour show. I never even intended it to go an hour, but this has been a lot of fun. So go have a good rest of your day, everyone. Go Niners.